now. How is it going, everybody? Joe Snow back here. Today we're going to be doing a patch review. What we're going to be doing is going through all the changes to the various cards. We're going to be talking about them, how they're going to impact the meta, things like that. And then we're also going to be getting to, at the end, things that didn't change and potential roadblocks and problems that I see, you know, either new ones or ones that haven't been solved yet. So, let's go ahead and get right into this. We're going to start off with Commander's Horn here. Actually, I'm going to check something real quick. Okay, my mic is indeed better. Sorry about that, guys. So, Commander's Horn. You guys know what it does. Now it's boosting 5 units by 3 instead of 4. I think this is one of the biggest and most important changes that has been made, and I am all in favor of this. I think this is awesome. Commander's Horn is a card that's just been completely overpowered for a very long time. It's one of the easiest cards in the game to just slam 20 points down. From your silver slot, which is insanely powerful. It's always been insanely powerful. More so, it is neutral. Obviously, it also has the synergy with Ethne, Aglace, things like that. But I think the real problem with this card is the fact that it's sort of twofold, right? A, it was a neutral, so you could slam it in any deck, and you were seeing this in all sorts of decks. You were seeing this in Northern Realms decks that were playing Bork. You were seeing it in Monster's Nest. You were seeing it basically everywhere, obviously. Scoia'tael decks. This card needed to be changed, and I'm 100% in favor of it. Another thing is that this card has sneakily gotten much, much better over time, because as time went on, two things happened. A, there were cards printed that let you search out Commander's Horn. So Commander's Horn wasn't just a 20 played from your hand. It was, you would play another card, a John Natalis type of deal, search it up, and then just slam down a absurd amount of points. The other thing that's going on with this is, over time, as Gwent's evolved, because Commander's Horn's like an OG card, right? It's been around since the beginning. Cards have, it's gotten much easier to develop multiple units into a single row in like one play, right? Back in the older days of Gwent, you played a dude, it was a dude. It stood there, it did dude things. Now, dudes are making dudes, they're bringing in other dudes, they're telling you all, everybody get in here, come drink with me. Everything's going on, right? You have Hattoris, you have, every faction has a muster now. Agitators is one of the biggest offenders with this. It is just so much easier for the majority of factions to slam multiple units onto the board, making the quote-unquote cost of the Commander's Horn not really a cost at all. Sure, there were some situations where it would be slightly bricked and you'd only be getting 12 or so value out of it, but overall, it was just way too high reward for way lower of a risk. And I think that this changes need to be made. In general, I think you need to be extra careful with neutral cards as they become ubiquitous, and when they get to a certain power level, such as we've seen Renew do this in past metas, where it's just in every deck everywhere, and you don't want that. You want the games to feel different. You want the factions to feel different and unique. That's not to say there's not a place for powerful neutral cards, but this was clearly an offender for a very long time, and in my opinion, and I'm very happy to see the change. So we have Bone Talisman. Updated ability, Resurrect a Bronze Beast or Cultist unit, or heal an ally. Okay, so they're basically taking away the boost. I'm assuming that the Berserker Marauders are now Cultists instead of Svabold, whatever the hell that was. I actually have no idea, I'm bad at the lore. But yeah, this seems completely fair. It's super easy to tutor off a bronze. Not only was it very powerful, but it's quite flexible as well. Sometimes when your opponent passes, and you're only like 2 points behind, you could, you know, strengthen your Olgier, things like that. It does have a certain amount of flexibility. I think this is a very fair nerf. I wasn't actually expecting this, but I'm sort of happy to see it. That being said, as we'll get to later, I think that Skellige might have gotten hit a little bit too hard. They sort of hit it from every angle, and maybe they hit it from one too many angles, in my opinion. But I definitely don't mind the change on this card. I think it's pretty warranted. You have to be really careful with these tutor effects, because it's basically playing your bronze unit, thinning your deck, and the thing that's tutoring it is already adding points on top. So you were effectively like +5ing on an already really powerful bronze and the Berserker Marauder in the large majority of scenarios. Worst comes to worst, you were hitting a bear, and it was like still insanely good there. I do not mind this change at all. Oglace has two changes to it. Power change from 9 to 8, basically meaningless. A point's a point, right? A point's a point, but that's all it is. The interesting part about this Oglace change is it's going to banish the card after you steal it. So it's going to add a little bit more of the when should I play this, what if my opponent has Oglace, particularly in Scoia'tael Mirrors, things like that. Can you really rely on something for Ethne? Do you need to build your Ethne deck with more targets? In general, I'm a huge fan of this change. I think it adds a little bit more complexity rather than just slamming down your points and saying go. The better players will be able to gain small edges out of things like this. You're going to get people once in a while. And, yeah, I mean, Oglace is still a very, very good card. And she might actually wind up being problematic if a faction... Like, basically, if Nilfgaard starts playing silver spells, Oglace probably becomes too good. This is a card that's changed 4,000 times, basically, over the course of Gwent. I don't expect that to stop. This is a fundamentally very, very powerful card. Keep it on the watch list. I imagine it's probably going to change again. I do think this is cool, though, in the fact that, sure, the point change, whatever, I'm in favor of it as well. I think 8's probably still way too high. But I do think that, that the added it's a small layer of complexity, but it is another layer of complexity that they added on top of it. And I think this is good. I think more cards need to have stuff like this. And, yeah, ways to mess with your opponent's graveyard are super interesting. Then we come to Yorvith Meditation. This card was probably a bit overtuned before. I don't think it was quite as bad as everyone else thought it was. But yeah, it was probably a bit overtuned. Now I think it's basically unplayable. Forcing two enemy units on the same road to duel each other, you're just losing A, a ton of raw points, B, a ton of flexibility in the fact that you can no longer have your guy fight their Bork and things like that. Yeah, I just don't see this unit seeing play in your standard Scoia'tael deck basically ever, when I would expect to see something like Yorvith Meditation potentially, is if there's some sort of movement-based Scoia'tael deck that's very good, or, you know, playable tier, basically, I think that this could be an interesting payoff card for that archetype, the way it stands now. You sort of get, like, old-powered Yorvith, but you need some setup, which I do like. They probably went a little too far. If I was messing with this card, this ability's interesting. I really do miss the ability to have my unit duel their unit. I think that's the biggest stealth nerf to the card. Yeah, I don't know. I think in the future he'll probably wind up getting a couple of points tacked onto him, because I think this card was balanced for the old ability, and I don't necessarily know that they gave quite enough credit to how different the new ability is from the old ability and exactly how much worse. So I didn't mind seeing a hit to this card. In my opinion, I think they took it a little bit too far, and I think its play rate's going to go down dramatically, just like drop off the charts. Then we get to Slizzard. Slizzard's basically just a play rate card, right? The card, arguably too good. It's very, very powerful. The card's still good. Its amount of play is going to change by exactly 0%. If a deck wants a Slizzard, it's still going to want a Slizzard. It's still going to be quite good. 2 points might still be too high for it. This might need to be a 1-point effect. The thing with this card is it does actually require some setup. Now, granted, monsters are very good at getting this particular type of setup, so there's that. But, yeah, I mean, it's a super powerful effect. Any deck, the consumed decks, your general monster decks, you know, your weather decks, your Siri Nova decks, I think they're all still going to play Slizzard. I think that the change from 3 to 2 is, you know, a step in the right direction, but I do not see this affecting play rate basically at all. If there's a playable monster deck, it's very likely to contain Slizzards. Yeah, I mean, fine change. No problems with this. Maybe they didn't go far enough with it, if anything. Good old Monster Nest. This is sort of a controversial one. A lot of people thought that it really didn't need the big hit. I don't exactly know where I stand on this one. Monster's Nest does offer you an insane amount of flexibility, but it's sort of weird flexibility, right? Like, the decks that you're playing it in, you're basically choosing between one of 2, sometimes in weird situations, one of 3 options, even though there's far more than that on the card. The thing about this card was that different decks will play it for different reasons. Like, you'll put it in deck A, and it'll have a standard target of whatever, you know, maybe a Arrakis Behemoth, but in some situations you'll take this. And it always had the fallback of the Ghoul. The Ghoul is the reason why this card is ubiquitous. or it was ubiquitous in monsters decks, because you always had the fallback of just like a massive point slam. You could find your sweet movement or utility unit or ancient foglet, whatever you needed at the time, and if all else fails, you just use it at the end of the game, slam down, 20 points or so. I think hitting this card is completely reasonable. I don't have a problem with a faction-specific card, particularly with the ghoul interaction I'm talking about, making 20 points at the end of the game, that you had to do a little bit of work to get there, but the work got easier because now spies stay in your graveyard. And I don't think it should have that type of power plus that type of flexibility. I think that's what the real issue with the card was. If it just had that level of power, like there's nothing wrong with a 7 strength ghoul as a silver. There is nothing wrong with that card. No one would bitch about it. It would be completely fine. The problem is when you combine raw power with flexibility, you make the fail rate almost non-existent on this card. So in general, it just becomes far too powerful. So I'm very okay with this change. I'm curious to see what they do with it in the future. Boosting by 1 seems strange. It's just going to kind of look funny on the board. Usually things are boosted by 2 or 3 or something like that. Boost by 1's a little weird. Not the most intuitive, I suppose, but, it is what it is, and I think it's a card that, is much more balanced now. I'm pretty okay with the change. Like I said, I do have a bit of mixed feelings on it, but I think overall this is fine. And I certainly understand, at the very least, what they were going for here. Like, even if I don't 100% agree with the change, it certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And I can get behind that. Slave Driver. So this card was so busted that they hit it in 2 ways. Power change from 2 to 1, so, 50% strength decrease. It's 1 point, but it is a 50% strength decrease. Depends on how you want to look at it. And the card's ability no longer guarantees a choice between 3 units. So this means it's going to have more... There's not ever a time that I can think of that you would ever gain something by it being more than one of a choice. I mean, I guess, right? It's weird. I don't know. It's going to make the card have more of a fail rate, which I think is good. I do not like the fact that this card exists. I think this kind of card is terrible for the game. I'm just not a fan of it. It's super annoying to play against. In general, it creates negative player experiences. It can also create some crazy chains, so I don't know the fact that it's not doomed. I'm really not a fan of that. I think they probably also needed to doom this thing. Yeah, I just don't like cards like this in general. A, there's a very heavy RNG element to it, and B, it's just not fun to play against. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't balance high-tier competitive stuff around fun, but it is an important element to look towards when you're playing games. And, they are games after all. I don't know. I'd be in favor of just wiping this thing off the earth, but I like the double nerf to it. I still think the card's good, and it's only going to be as good as the decks that play it are, It's got to find the right home, but if there's a deck that wants this type of effect, the card's still insanely good. I don't think it'll change the play rate of it, anything like that. I think the card's still very good. You have to work a little bit harder now, and it does have more of a fail rate. Card's still very good. This is the hallelujah moment here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank the gods. This is the one real fundamental mechanical change that they put in the game. It does so much more than just alleviating that extra spy. Now, the mind games of, if I play my spy here, I never have a spy in round 2. I never have a spy in round 3. This is so good for the game. This is probably the biggest change. Commander's Horn is up there also, but I think the Summoning Circle change is the one that's going to show the largest impact. Everyone wanted this. Everyone was waiting for it. If you didn't, I don't know what you're thinking. This just makes so much of a healthier game, and it's a breath of fresh air that, once they play their spy, that's it. Now you're living in a world where they don't have a spy. You can guarantee that, and you can play accordingly. You can start to formulate some sort of plan. It also takes out Spy Igni, which was just a really stupid interaction. Gets rid of all of that. This was so needed, such a breath of fresh air. This is the single most important change of the patch. You could basically throw everything else out the window, and this is the one we needed. So awesome. Thumbs up, CDPR. You got this one right. You hit the nail on the head. Fucking kudos to you, boys. Well done. Thank you, thank you, thank you from myself and the rest of the Gwent community. Shawnee changed from 5 to 4. This one is also a little bit controversial, right? So here are the two arguments. The two arguments are, Shani's in every single deck, blah, 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 blah. She's a very good card, and she's in every Northern Realm deck. We need to tune her down. The other side of the argument is, she's in every Northern Realms deck. There's a little bit of synergy going on there, but she's mostly in every Northern Realms deck because the rest of their golds kind of suck right now. And Shani is just a good, solid one. So, if you have 10 pizzas, right? Not a lot of people are going to eat the apple you have next to it because you're just going to eat all the pizzas. But where was I going with this analogy? But let's say you have 10 piles of horse crap on the ground. That apple starts to look really good. So the apple is still an apple. It's always going to taste like an apple. It's just whether you're comparing it to pizza, like the Scoia'tael golds, or whether you're comparing it to a pile of horse turds, like the Northern Realms golds. I tend to fall in the camp that Shani was probably okay. At a 5. That being said, I'm not really sad she's going to a 4. These resurrection effects are incredibly powerful, and they're just hitting the game on every angle. They're basically in every faction now. They're almost all playable. I can't think of one off the top of my head that's just not playable. I'm okay with the change, but I don't really think it was necessary. I could go either way on this one. I tend to lean towards the fact that Shani was mostly changed for play rate, and I don't necessarily know whether that's, enough to actually do it. But once again, I'm fine with it. Then I will say I don't play a ton of Northern Realms. We come to him. Him's still way too good. This card's just insane. They toned it down by 1 point. The interaction with this into Scal, particularly, is just nuts, right? Like, it's not just 1 point, where you could be like, hey, it's 1 point, it's, 25% of its power level. No, it's not. A lot of times this card comes down for 27, 28, 29 points. You take 1 point off of that. It's not a big deal. This card's play rate will not change at all. It's still going to be completely busted. It's probably the best Skellige gold right now. I mean, it's felt that I've played maybe 200-300 games of Skellige in the last week or so. I've been playing a lot of that faction, got some pro laddering done with it, etc., etc. And the power level on him just continued to amaze me over and over and over again. I don't think this changes his play rate. The card's still very good. The nerf necessary probably didn't go far enough. These type of effects are just problematic in general. Tutors that hit other tutors that hit powerful cards like da-da-da-da-da-da. It adds up really, really fast. That being said, as we'll see, there were some other changes to the cards that it usually pulls. So that's also a indirect hit to this card, and maybe it becomes more reasonable. I still think the card's absolutely insane, though. One of the best artworks in Gwent. Definitely in favor of the change. So, Skirmisher. Instead of strengthen, it boosts. That's all. It's still the same amount of raw points, right? Not a huge deal there. Same amount of raw points. The big thing is the change with Polly, and I think this is a really dumb way to go about it. I actually think this is stupid. I actually don't know now. This might, in fact, actually buff Farseers, right? Don't quote me on that, but if this buffs Farseers, this will actually be better in a significant, portion of scenarios, because they'll boost, which will cause the Farseer to boost, so you're actually just gaining more raw points. And you're not really hitting the Polly, because when one of these guys flies off of... I mean, you're hitting it by a couple of points, but when one of these guys flies off of a Barclay, they're still getting the strength in. So the Poly's still going to be strong. I don't think this is... I don't know. I'm not thrilled with this change. It's probably a step in the right direction. I think this could have been handled better. I think Polly's much more of the problematic card than the Skirmisher. I would have liked to have just seen, like, maybe one raw point taken off the Skirmishers. I think would have been fine. They're just still a little bit overtuned when you compare them to most of the other bronzes in the game. Yeah, I don't know. Not a fan. I think they could have done this differently. And I think Polly's the real bitch of the bunch here, not the Skirmisher. Not in this way, anyway. I would have just shaved a point off of this guy. This is the type of card... You've heard me talk several times about the point not mattering, the point not mattering. On bronzes like this is where the point matters. This is one of the situations where I think they should have just shaved a point. Where usually it's the effects and things like that that can become problematic. This, I think, just needed a point shave, and they didn't go that route, so I'm a little bit disappointed there. Stammelford Tremor. I mean, I'm not going to tell you anything you didn't know. Ithlin's the problem card. They're aware that Ithlin's the problem card. This is a temporary fix. This is just flying in a holding pattern, right? Ithlin is busted, is going to continue to be busted. Ithlin into Tremors, probably still fine. I don't know, I haven't tried it out yet, but probably still fine. As the patch has only been out like a couple of hours. But yeah, I mean, Ithlin's the real problem card here. It's super obvious to everyone. CDPR knows it. They didn't have a great way to redesign it. They don't know what they're doing with it. They're probably busting their ass on 4,000 other projects right now. So yeah, they just didn't get to this. And in the meanwhile, they basically said, alright, well, at least let's, you know, this is basically putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound is what it's doing. Yeah, you'll stop a little bit of the blood flow for a while. It's going to open right back up. Anything else gets printed, boom, Ithlin's completely insane again. Also, Ithlin might still be completely insane right now. We're going to have to require some testing, see how it goes. I think Ithlin's still probably completely nutty. Yeah, not thrilled about this one either. I just think Ithlin needs a rework. She restricts design space. You guys have heard it all before. I'm not telling anything new. She's the problem card here, not the Tremors. Although, Tremors, in its last form, there was more of a case for playing Tremors in non-Ithlin decks. Like, Tremors actually was a reasonable play. If you had a way to damage units, like 8 units on the board, one of them being at 1, you're already looking at 14, which isn't an incredibly hard scenario to set up, and it's got, like, you know, close to an infinite ceiling, quote-unquote. Yeah, the old Tremors was pretty good, but I think it needed to be. Like, excuse me, now you're just never going to see this in another deck. Whereas before, I think it was at least worth probably more experimentation than people were giving credit for. Agitator. Great. Change it to 1. Awesome. Perfect. This needed to be done. These type of cards are inherently problematic. Shave a point off it. Beautiful. This is one of those scenarios where I think shaving the point here really, really helps. I think this is great. This is exactly what I would have done to the card. I think it's fine. I don't think there's a ton to say about it. It just brings down the power level of the Bronze Dwarf plays to keep them more in line with what the other factions are doing. You're not neutering the card. You're still leaving it in its current form, which is still very good. It's still incredibly playable. Yeah, just shaving a point off it. This is sort of what I think they also probably should have done to Skirmisher. But, yeah, I'm happy with this. This looks good to me. Well done. Mahakam Guard. So they just completely reworked this card, right? So they shaved 1 point in general, and they made it so that the boosting is... Well, the boost by 7 is interesting, right? In some ways, it's a buff because it gives you greater flexibility to play around stuff like Igni, getting multiple units Igni, multiple units Scorch, things like that. In other ways, it's a detriment because boosting by 7, like, that's obviously, it's only a 4-strength body. The 7 is, you know, the larger number here. That's the bigger side of the card. And when your bigger side of the card is the boosting number, you're putting that on another body, which can be really vulnerable. You know, you might have one giant unit that gets Scorched now, or things like Viper Witchers get a lot better. When you're boosting something by 3, you can sort of dance around them, right? Keep everything at moderate range. When you start boosting by 7, things like that tend to really be able to take a toll on you. I don't know why my sound just cut out. Sorry about that, guys. I hope all the sound is well. If this ruins my video, I'm going to be quite pissed. Anyway, moving along here. Let me just check my chat real quick. Is the sound still going off? If anyone's got any sound issues, speak now or forever hold your peace. I hope the sound is still good. Okay. Anyways, that being said, this was basically a fringe playable. You only saw it in some of the decks anyway. I don't think it was a huge deal. It was mostly used to counter Swears, to be very honest. I don't know, fine. I don't think this card really needed to be changed, but I don't know. I like the point shave. I like it going down to an 11 instead of a 12, and it's still, like, pretty good at that. I don't necessarily know about this other change. I'm sure they have their reasons. I'm not really seeing them. It's fine, but I don't think it was necessary. Elven Scout. Okay, this is the reverse Slave Driver that still has all the same problems as Slave Driver. This card is completely broken. Power change from 2 to 1, great. I'm happy to see it. That being said, the card's still going to see a ton of play. This is a card that I was largely in favor of when the patch first came out. When everyone was hating on Create, I was of the firm belief that it did not belong on silvers at all, but it was okay in bronzes to make games feel different and stuff. The more I play the game, the more I've changed my opinion on this matter, as I'm starting to see that this effect is just problematic when it's tournament quality playable. There's really no other way to put it. It just is. The swings you get from this card are completely insane. Let's say you're playing a mirror match. One guy sort of bricks, right? And he gets that Elven guy. It's like a 6 strength boost all elf. So he hits like a 7 off of it. The other guy gets a Hawker Smuggler. That turns it into like a 20-something point bronze over the course of a long round 1. I think the range on this card is just too wide. I don't like that this effect is playable. It also provides you 2 bodies for the price of 1 for things like Commander's Horn and such. These kind of cards are just so fundamentally problematic. I definitely swung my opinion around on this, and yeah, I don't know what else you do to this card. Maybe it just needs an entire rework, very similar to Slave Driver. It's still good. It's still probably too good. Premium card will still see a ton of play. Assuming the rest of Scoia'tael isn't gutted, which, spoiler, I do not think it is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This card's just very, very problematic. And it's also, it's not as unfun to play against the Slave Driver, but it's very frustrating to play against and annoying when your opponent high rolls. It does create some amount of negative play experiences, so, you know, I'm happy to see it reduced. I think that's necessary. In my opinion, it probably just needs a full rework. So, then we move on to Doppler. I actually have to read this one. Sure. They removed organic from the card categories. I don't have anything to say about this one, guys. I don't know. I've never played a Doppler in my life. I probably never will. We're going to move along. Doppler's fine. We get to Sirinova. This was one of the, probably the most discussed change, besides, I would say, the Summoning Circle. So you gotta think about this in a few separate ways, right? Like, obviously, subtracting 3 points is a nerf, but if you subtracted 1 point, it's probably a buff, right? Because now you have the potential to play around Ignis and things like that, which was, you know, very, very common. People would save their Ignis for last play type of deals. I do think 22 is a nerf. It is not a buff. 3 points is a lot, particularly just on a big, giant stat stick like this. Where you really have to judge it is, like, you want this kind of card to be good, because you are paying a very real price by putting this card in your deck. You have to build your deck in a very specific way, and it's very hard to quantify the amount of points you're throwing out the window when you build your deck to deal with Sirinova. You are throwing points out the window, it's just a matter of how much. You want this type of card to be good. This is also your big iconic card of the last, like, expansion, let's call it. I don't really think this card needed to be changed. That being said, I still think it's pretty good. It's just, how is it in relation to other finishers? Like, you have to see how it stacks up one-on-one against Rainfarn, Wakim, Nausicaa Brigade, shit like that. The other factions' big one-card finishers, if there's finishers that are 23 and 24 points in other factions, even if they take a bit more setup, this is going to take a huge hit. If the other finishers settle around 20 to 21 in the playable decks, well, then this is much, much better. It really, really depends on what neck of the woods that Sirinova is hanging out in. As a finisher, her relative power is related to the relative power of all the other finishers going on in the game. I would not have changed this card. I would have left it. I think this card was mostly changed to public outcry, and I don't think that is a particularly good way to balance, honestly. Yeah, I see no reason for this card to have changed. I'm a little saddened by it. That being said, I still think the card's pretty good, but it's really going to depend on what the single card finishers in the viable archetypes in the meta look like. What I really like about this card is that it gives, like, obviously it's an abomination in the dwarf deck and shit like that. I don't even think that's the best version, but they don't need a finisher. Where I really like Sirinova is it gives a finisher to factions that don't have a single powerful one-card finisher. Now, maybe you could say just print more powerful single one-card finishers for all the different factions. boom, sort of problem solved, then it's okay if Nova's weaker. And then maybe they will do that in the future. But if you look at like the Dagon decks, the Death Wish decks, the Moonlight Fog decks, things like that, they do not have this type of raw power. And this card has been such a boon for those archetypes. It's been able to hold them up to almost competitive, right? Like, those decks aren't tier 1, but they have some play to them. They can get some wins in a competitive environment, and they've been close because of this additional power level, because all of their bronzes are basically trash right now. So I'm sad to see this card hit, but overall I think it'll probably be fine. It's real close. It's real close. I would have liked to see it at 23 if they were going to hit it. 24 was probably very close to a straight buff. I think 23 would have been a little bit nicer. You know, MJ, Jordan, just crush it. But yeah, 22, we'll see how it goes. Berserker Marauder. I don't know that they needed to hit this and the charm. This might have to do with him. Like, the things that this deck was doing, granted, the deck didn't have a lot of interaction, etc., etc., etc. But the raw points... Sorry about that, guys. The raw points that this deck is able to generate was off the fucking charts. And I think this, in combination with the changes we've already talked about, and one we're going to get to in a little bit, you can probably see at the bottom of the page, is probably a bit heavy-handed for Skellige overall. Unless there's something that I'm missing, I really feel like they didn't need to hit every single aspect of Skellige. The Skellige deck was definitely... I mean, I think it was the third best deck in the meta behind Spies and Dwarves. And I think it got hit really, really, really hard. So I'm just not a huge fan of this. I think this was a cool, unique ability. And the thing is, it doesn't really add anything to the game, right? Your opponent's still going to want to finish off your units. He's still going to want you not leave damaged units around. It's just a hit to the points. Now, did it need a hit to the points? Was it a little bit out of control? Maybe, arguably. But I would have at least liked to have seen it in an environment where the charm gets hit. Or leave the charm but hit this. That type of deal. I think that hitting both at once is not a very controlled experiment, right? Like, it was too strong before, and now it's probably going to be too weak. I think they just swung the pendulum a little bit too far. Now, that being said, if they left the charm alone, I'm completely okay with this change. It's interesting. This is sort of balancing a whole deck, not balancing an individual card, which is sort of a weird approach to take. Could be necessary, but it's definitely a strange approach, and it does present you some conundrums like this. Maybe they just decided to err on the side of caution with this one, but yeah, I don't know. This is a big hit. This is certainly a big hit here. Sleeve Infantry. Spawn copies are now doomed. Sure. This just seems like a thing they're doing. As you can see, Half-Elf Hunter. Also, so I'm assuming pretty much everything that spawns copies of itself, or maybe even tokens in general, are going to be doomed, right? We see that with Harpies. The eggs don't go in the graveyard. That probably means they're planning on doing more with the graveyard in the future. They don't, they don't want the UI clogged. They don't want to completely break cards like, I don't even know what she's called, Morntart now, I think? Whatever used to be Grave Hag that, sorry guys, maybe I'm getting sick, that blows up the whole graveyard. You don't want 4 billion guys in there. I think this is probably largely a cosmetic change and a change to open up design space for future cards. I think this is fine. I completely understand what they're doing. Great. Awesome. Cool. Nothing much to see there. This is the other big, big hit to the Skellige archetype. Lock-in! Thank you so much for the host, man. Appreciate it, dude. Hope your streaming went well, good sir. Yeah, so moving back along, we're talking about Restore now. So the Restore hit, once again, as we were talking about when we were talking about the Marauders, this is a card that maybe needed to be changed. I just think they changed too many Skellige cards at once. This is a huge, huge hit to the power level of this card. You can look no further than, if you've ever played Skellige before, think of the games where you're able to restore take your Beastmaster, or whatever the restore target of choice in the meta is. When you're able to proc that and get it off round 1, 2, and 3, or the times where you draw your restore in round 3 and you're like, ah, well, it's a 19-point silver, it's not that bad. And that's what this card is now. It's not that bad. It's probably still very, very playable. I doubt it's going to leave the Skellige decks. That being said, this is a huge hit to the power level. The general power level of the Skellige deck just sort of got the hammer from every single angle here. And I'm not sure that all of the nerfs together were justified. I don't actually agree with their assessment that Sigdrifa is being played in every Skellige deck. I also don't think, I do not agree with this reasoning at all. If you read their statement, Restore and Sigdrifa are currently played in every Skellige deck. It is not only unhealthy for the game and deck variety, which is fair, if Sigdrifa is played in every deck, which is fair, but also indicates that these cards were too strong. It does not. You go back to the Shani thing. Shani might have been completely fine power level-wise, it's just relative to the other cards in the faction, it was strongest, so it saw play in every deck because of lack of better alternatives. And I don't think that's exactly what's going on with Restore here. I'm okay with hitting Restore, I'm just not okay with all of the Skellige nerfs coming at once. I really feel like they hamstrung the deck a little bit here. In general, this change is probably okay. Restore was a little too good before, but this is a huge, huge hit to Restore. This is, this could be on the order of 14 points in a game, something like that, which is probably a bit much. So we'll see how it plays out. I am a little fearful for Skellige's immediate future. We'll sort of see how that goes. I would not be surprised to see a return to a more boat-oriented strategy with the light longships, things like that. This change is fine, but once again, it's fine in a vacuum. I don't know that this change is necessary in the while going along with all of the other changes. Ointment. Alright, so we get to Ointment. Heal an ally and randomly split 5 boosts between allies or Resurrected Bronze. So they just chopped the first part off of this card, which I think is good. The card didn't need the extra flexibility. It's already very, very good. It's very good, and it's very tutorable. So, sort of like we were talking about with the Skellige Charm, and even Monster Nest to an extent, it's sort of the concept of you don't want it to have this high power level and flexibility. You should pay a cost for flexibility. Different things are going to be better in situations. You can't have a 20-point silver and then a 20-point silver that also has another ability. It's just a strict upgrade. So I think reducing the flexibility on this card is fine. The large majority of the time, it was used for the Resurrect anyway. But just cutting off that additional option, making it harder for them to play around things like Igni, stuff like that. I think that this change is fine. I'm a fan of it. That being said, I've never played an Ointment in my life. But yeah, I do think that this type of change definitely makes sense. I just don't think that you want to have a ton of raw power and a ton of flexibility printed on the same card. It's just too good. You have to sacrifice some level of raw power for flexibility. That's just what you have to do. Moving on to the Veteran. This is, well, incredibly surprising to me. They reverted it back from Soldier to Support. Why? Why? Sure. Was it probably too good in the PTR? Yeah, probably. Why not try and find a more creative way to change it? Like, this effectively just kills an entire archetype, which just kind of sucks. A, I was a fan of Veterans. B, Skellige's other archetypes just, got bent over the garbage can. They're not having a good day. Not that that should particularly influence the balance of this card, but, it's sort of relevant here. I just think they could have taken points away from it. They could have made you jump through more hoops to get the ability. They could have had it so it can only be resurrected once. I don't know. There's other ways that are more creative that they could have approached this instead of just putting the soldier tag back on and stripping it off. Besides the fact that I don't like this change and I think it could have been done better, I also think that this sets a horrendous precedent going forward. And let me explain what I mean about that. They announced that they were going to strip the tag back off of it like 36 hours after this was live on PTR. So the PTR just goes live. A ton of people have access to it. This is an online game. There were some streamers playing this deck, so of course a lot of people are going to gravitate towards it. The streamers, probably some of the better players, developed a really tight, well-built version of the deck pretty quickly because it's an old archetype. So you had a really solid version of this coming out the gates, and then people just raised their pitchforks. 36 hours is not enough of a sample size to basically decide anything ever when it comes to card game balance. And I think it sets a horrendous precedent that they're willing to make changes based on Reddit outcries in that short of a period of time. They didn't look at it. They didn't allow it to naturally evolve, allow other decks to get tighter in the PTR, allow some counters to be built up, allow anything to evolve around it. They didn't try messing with the points. They just said, this is a problem. We don't need problems right now. Take that tag off of it. And I sort of think that is, well, a terrible, terrible way to go about it. So even though this doesn't bother me so much from a power level perspective, I think this is one of the worst changes. And this is one of the few things that, well, discourages me, disappoints me about the way they'll possibly make decisions in the future. I do not think that this decision was particularly well thought out here, and I hope that there's a change in thinking that goes on. Avalock! Ah! Oh my fucking god. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I might be happier about this than the Summoning Circle change. He's doomed. It's only like 6 months overdue, guys. He's finally doomed. Finally, this moron cannot be resurrected anymore. Here's the kicker. Mill's probably still a reasonable deck. I don't know why, but they just haven't killed this deck. They just don't want to do it. This is a big step in the right direction. Awesome, great, super fucking fantastic. Please, should have been done a long time ago. I actually don't think there's any excuse for it not being done a long time ago. This is the least fun deck to play against. Basically, no one enjoys it except for 6 masochists out there. Or is it... Masochists are the one that like inflicting pain on others, right? I think that's correct. There's like 6 masochists that just love playing this deck, making everyone else's day miserable, punishing good deck building. The games are half-hour long. There's just nothing that the Mill archetype added to this game. Nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. Complete, miserably failed experiment. Yet they still print cards like Shylard and Stregobor. I don't get it. This is yet another step in the right direction. Don't be surprised if you still get milled out at some point, because I don't think the deck is dead yet. It will still get you. And if you're like some sort of deck that's relying on a heavy amount of thinning, you're still fucked. What's going to be the real bitch of the bunch here is if decks that thin the large majority of their cards become at all reasonably popular, people are going to start running this, and it's still going to make your life a living hell. This is great. This is an awesome step in the right direction. It's not nearly far enough. For Avalock, it is fine, because Avalock isn't just the mill card. Avalock has a lot to offer the game. He's a way to more consistently put together your combo pieces. He's a way to make rounds longer for decks like Axeman or decks like Light Longship. We've seen Avalock be used in some really cool, interesting ways in the past, and I don't want that type of effect out of the game. And since cards are the only way to influence time in this game, because that's, you know, the amount of cards sort of dictates how long a round goes, this is sort of the only way you can get that type of effect. And I do think that this type of effect is really cool. That being said, it's the other mill cards that now need to just get axed, deleted from the game, completely reworked. The archetype is still horrendous. I played against Mill earlier this morning, so the patch was live for all of about an hour and a half, and someone's already out there trying to mill me. Guess what? It was a damn close game. He almost got me. So, I do not think they went far enough with this. I'm happy. I want to see all the rest of the mill cards on here. Then we come... Let me just check something real quick, guys. Okay, yeah, it looks like I'm not getting any audio issues here. Beautiful. Impera Enforcers. Okay, this is sort of what everyone expected, and thank God. What you were hearing a lot of, at least I was hearing a lot of, in particular was, yeah, I understand that Nilfgaard's this super powerful deck, but at least it's not brain dead like dwarves. Yeah, it is. Or it used to be anyway. When you... Obviously, it was just a strict increase in power level, letting it get all of the retroactive pings, but it also took a lot of the finesse out of when to play our Enforcers. Can you afford to play it? Does this deck likely have removal for it? Can I stand if he has removal? Should I commit it here? Should I wait a little bit longer? It made your mulligans easier. You would just, you know, drop down a whole bunch of Infiltrators first, and then play your Enforcers for 4,000 points of value. I am super psyched to see this change. I still think Impera Enforcers are inherently too good of a card. I do not think that this is going to stop the Spy archetype. I expect it to still be high tier 1, if not, excuse me, the very best deck. This is basically the only change that affects that deck. Besides the fact that Amir can't now be used to abuse and pick up more spies. Like, basically, the old spy deck was able to outspy you every single time because Nilfgaard has Yennefer for extra copies of Summoning Circle, which no longer works, and Amir would be able to pick up a spy, which no longer works. And they would also accrue value while doing this, which was particularly egregious. That being said, this deck's been good for forever. This is the only hit to it. It's not going anywhere. And all the other decks got worse, too. They shaved a bunch of points off dwarves. They beat Skellige half to death with 4,000 nerfs. This is a large nerf. Do not get me confused here. This is a very, very big hit to Impera Enforcers. They're still insanely good and, in my opinion, overpowered. Probably, they're on the short list for best bronze in the game after this nerf. We've seen what they do before. This is sort of, the way I've been equating this is to, you ever go into Best Buy, and let's say you're an employee at Best Buy. Let's take it from the other side. You have an $800 TV set, right? You got to sell this bitch, right? That's your job. You get commission. You got to sell this $800 TV, or I don't know if I could say Best Buy. Any TV store, right? Any store that sells TVs. You're a TV store salesman. So what you do is, you slap a for sale sticker on it, and you say $900, so people feel great about it. It's not actually a thing. Like, the fact that it ever existed in the other form was sort of tricking us into thinking that this form is reasonable. And I don't think that this form is completely reasonable at all. I think this card is still way too good, very overpowered, going to continue to carry that archetype. And not only is the deck sort of annoying to play against from a play pattern perspective, but it's also just been insanely good for forever. It hasn't changed. There's not a lot of room for innovation. The core bronzes are just the same core bronzes over and over again. I mean, you can go back 4 months and look at what the Amir Spy decks look like, and they're very, very similar. I don't think that type of continuity in the meta is particularly great for the game. That being said, I am very happy to see this change, and I think that Spies might be the best deck out of the gates. We'll see. If I had to take a horse in the race, I've only played maybe 10 or 12 games. Then I came on, made the video. This is day 1. But yeah, this would be my horse for day 1 best deck out the gates. So we have some minor changes here. We're not going to spend as much time on these, as I don't think they're nearly as impactful. Joanna, sure, throw a point on her. Cool. Champion, alright, awesome. Treason is, Now you just get to duel anything. This might actually see some play. I'm kind of curious whether this type of card will see play or not. We'll have to see. My guess is probably still no, but this is starting to become close to playable here. So I would keep an eye on this one. Treason. This is a really cool rework. It gives Nilfgaard access to duel, but in a good way, right? Like, I like that certain factions are better at doing things than others. This is something I talked about a little bit on the Grandmaster Plan podcast the other day. I don't mind that all factions have access to carryover, for example, but some factions should be a little bit better at it. I don't mind that all factions have access to to use their graveyard as a resource, but some should be better at it, like Skellige should be better at it. Right now, Scoia'tael's kind of better at it. I think that this is a very interesting way to give Nilfgaard access to the duel mechanic, but it's in a real contained form, right? Like, this card's probably not going to be tournament quality playable, but it does give them access to the duel mechanic, and if your opponent ever F's up, you can really get him. So it's kind of cool. I like this change a lot. I think this is just sweet. Big fan of this. Good old Berza. So this card's good now. Part of the thing was, beforehand, if you wanted to pick what bronze or silver item you were going to play, you had to only play 1, maybe 2 in your entire deck, that type of thing. Now, if there's ever a deck where you can pull whatever item you want out, you no longer have that restriction. The strict tutor ability, rather than random, is a huge upgrade. It opens up a lot of different decks that you could potentially belong in. Now, whether any Scoia'tael deck that would want this type of effect comes to power, we'll have to wait and see. That being said, I think this is a very good card and entirely capable of seeing tournament level play. I would watch out for this card. I think it's very good now. Nithril. This card's still bad. They really want it to be good. They should just do something else with it, because it's still bad. Deal 6 damage, +1 for each Wild Hunt unit in hand. Well, a lot of the Wild Hunt units aren't great. R.I.P. Frostdog. Please make him great again. A lot of them aren't great, and a lot of them pay you off for playing them early, which is also not what this card wants to do. The later the game goes, the worse this card gets. Not a great trait to have on a silver, as generally you want to be using your bronzes earlier and then having your silvers for later, things like that. Also, his ability, when it's at its best, your opponent's not oftentimes slamming down 16, 17, 18 strength units in round 1. They're just not doing that. So when he's at its best, your opponent's not giving you the type of targets you really need for this card to excel, which I also think is super awkward. This card is just awkwardly designed. They keep pushing it, they keep trying, but I mean, this is what happens when you try and take a go-kart and compare it to a race car. You could put a new engine on the go-kart, you could put a new bumper on it, you could get it fucking sponsored by Wonder Bread and have a nice little sticker. You could put a cougar in the driver's seat. It doesn't matter. It's still a fucking go-kart, and it's just not getting you anywhere. For this type of effect to be good, the numbers would have to be tweaked significantly more, far beyond their comfort level, I'm sure. The car's just not good. And it's one of the sweeter animations in the game, so I hope it gets good at some point. Kidwani Revenant. Remove the Doom category from the base unit. Sweet. Maybe, once there's a Northern Realm Cursed payoff card, this card could be good. For a 4-strength unit, it is the scariest 4-strength unit in the game. When it comes down, basically you go, oh shit, what do I do about that? Which is kind of cool. I like that. This is one of the few cards that's like, I feel like it's really nicely designed, where you pay this huge upfront cost of playing a 4-strength unit, and it's vulnerable, but if it lives, the payoff is very, very real. So I like this. This potentially opens up some more room for it, for some more resurrection stuff. Maybe the Northern Realm Silver Sigdrifa for Cursed Unit, whatever that card's called. Maybe she starts to see some play. This archetype still needs work. My gut instinct is that, sort of like Death Wish, they didn't flesh out the entire archetype in one expansion. The next set of cards probably have some more curse stuff in it. It'll take a little bit of time, but this is one to keep an eye on, as I think this change is good. And once that archetype becomes more playable as a whole, potentially a card to watch out for. Also, it's a very cool card. It influences your deck building. It's got a real cost to it. It's got a very high ceiling. This, in my opinion, is one of the best pieces of card design we've seen come from them in a while. This just is like a home run out of the ballpark with me. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And it's flavorful, too. It's really cool. Like, it's this cursed Revenant dude, and then you leave it alone, and it keeps getting more powerful, and he brings his friends. Like, I don't know, man. This card is awesome, and I'm glad to see this change. So that is going to conclude the full list of actual changes, although I still want to talk about some of the things that did not get changed here. So let's get rid of... Give me one moment here, guys. So some of the things that notably did not get changed in this patch. Yeah, I know it's a bitch to say, but there is still no answer to the coin toss. The coin toss is still going to be very, very problematic. More so, open passing is still going to be prevalent. These are fundamental mechanical issues. There was no change to anything like War Dancer, completely uninteractable carryover. I still think that these changes are mostly, like, the Spy change is great, the Commander's Horn change is great. A lot of the rest of this is sort of fluff, quality of life, making it a little bit nicer to play in this sandbox. My face cam covered the patch notes. Well, I don't know. Sorry, I was responding to chat. In any case, a lot of the structural, fundamental, mechanical issues are still here. The coin toss, open pass and people just not wanting to play round one, card advantage basically being all that matters, uninteractable carryover, they're all sort of symptoms of the coin toss issue. That being said, there's also Gold Weather, which is another incredibly polarizing effect, which I expect to see more of nowadays, since there are less things to sort of break the rules of Gwent. But none of these effects that break the rules of Gwent, besides Summoning Circle, have been addressed at all. And not that I expected them to be. There was certainly no hint or inkling. They said they were going to do anything about this. But I do think that that's going to cause the metagame to largely stay the same. I don't expect... I expect some changes. It's a big update. It's a big patch. And even small changes are going to have, like, the butterfly effect, right? Butterfly flaps and swings, tornado happens. There's going to be some interesting stuff to come out of this. And I do think in large majority, this patch did many, many good things for the game. But it's not the be-all, end-all. It's sort of, in my opinion, a really good maybe not a Band-Aid, maybe like an ace bandage on a gunshot wound. We still need to go to the hospital, and we still need to get treated, but we're not going to die on the way there anymore. So that's sort of where I am on that. There's a lot of fundamental things I would still like to see addressed. My opinion is that most of the same decks will still be very, very good, with the possible exception of Skellige. I assume that's going to get some amount of a rework, as that was very specifically designed. But I still think Spies are going to be incredible, probably the best deck. I think Dwarves are still going to be very, very playable. Notably, there was no change to Consume at all. Just a complete solitaire deck. Just, meh. Oh, you took a point off of Slizzard. It doesn't matter when they generate 200 points in 4 cards in round 3. So there are still some fundamental issues going on with the game right now, but I do think this patch is a step in the right direction. That being said, we're going to end the video here. I'm going to get back to streaming. If you guys liked the video, please hit subscribe. Costs you guys nothing. Helps me out. Stop by Top Deck, because the rest of my crew's fucking awesome, too. Really appreciate it, guys. Kick some ass out there on the ladder. Enjoy the patch. Have a good one. Joe Snow signing off.